Good afternoon, all the participants. Uh, we are going to have a wonderful session by Dr. Maya Ramnath Madam on the topic of knowledge crafts, construction and quarrying. On this great occasion through the Atal FDP, on behalf of the organizing team, we all heartily welcome you, Madam, for this session. Let me take the privilege to introduce our expert or resource person of this session, Dr. Maya Ramnath. Madam done her BA in Computer Science and Engineering from Bangalore University, Bangalore, and she done her MSc in Engineering from Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore, and she also did her PhD from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Later, Madam worked as postdoctoral researcher in the domain of databases and information systems group at Max Planck Institute for Informatics in Germany for nearly 5 years. Later, she associated with Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Dr. Maya Ramnath currently working as associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Her research areas includes database systems and information retrieval, semantic web data management, and knowledge graph construction and applications. Madam is having more than 2000 citations for her research publications. With this rich research profile, we are so fortunate to have you, Madam, in our Atal MTP on recent advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics. We all heartily welcome you, Madam. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So let me try to share my screen and see if it works. Okay, so it does not quite work because I am getting the presenter view. Are you guys getting the?
Yes, madam. We are able to.
Yes, madam.
see the slides.
So I'm the only one who has the presenter view, right? I mean, are you getting the full screen? Because
Yes.
I'm getting the presenter's view with all the slides
Yes.
here.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay. Can you see my mouse hovering over the screen as well?
No, madam.
No. Okay, so then what I will do is I'll just share my entire screen because I will need to point to things every now and then. I think that is going to be easier.
Yes,
Just a minute. So this should be visible, I think.
Yes, madam.
Yeah. So I will not be able to see any raised hands or anything. So if you have any questions, just interrupt me right in the middle and go ahead with that. So first of all, thank you for inviting me and for this talk and for this program at LFTP. It's my pleasure to be here. So today I would like to talk about knowledge base construction and querying. I'm not sure if the previous few lectures, whether this term knowledge base is something that you have heard of. At least I looked at some of the titles of the talks that you had, and perhaps Sarika Jain's talk on semantic web technologies, maybe she touched a little bit upon these knowledge bases. Is this the case? If not, I'll just explain what these knowledge bases are. And if you already know about it, perhaps it's a little bit of a repetition. You will bear with me, of course. So what I would like to do in this talk is to sort of go into some of the engineering details about this knowledge base construction. As you will see, the concept of knowledge base and how to use it in different applications, it's actually quite simple and straightforward. And there is a lot of scope for different kinds of research work as well as project work that are possible. But of course, the details are the difficult part, the engineering details. How exactly to construct these knowledge bases, how exactly to make them work for the applications and so on. So there will be quite a lot of details. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned, just speak up. So let me introduce knowledge bases in this one slide. So basically what I have here, a table with 3 columns, subject, predicate, and object. That is my knowledge base. So in this knowledge base, I have a lot of different triples. So these triples, each triple has a subject, a predicate, and an object. And each triple can be regarded as talking about one particular entity. So for example, the first triple here says Albert Einstein, born in Germany. That is a statement that we are making about Albert Einstein. And we know that Albert Einstein is an entity. Germany is another entity. And these two entities are related to each other through this predicate called born in. And I have a very specific way of representing the entity Albert Einstein, which is Albert underscore Einstein and theoretical underscore physicist. So this is theoretical physicist is not an entity by itself, but it is a class of entities. So the entity Albert Einstein is related to the class of entities, theoretical physicists, by the predicate type of. So this is a knowledge base which consists of lots of different triples or facts about various entities. And knowledge bases typically are constructed. Obviously, no one is going to, I mean, there are no knowledge bases which come ready-made like this. This is something that you construct out of a corpus of documents or even the web itself, right? So if you notice on the right side here, I have the small blurb. It's sort of the part of the AI grand dream, right? So AI, which has been with us for many, many decades. Basically, we have all this information that is available to us, completely digitized now because of the World Wide Web. So news, books, entertainment, scientific content, and so on. We would like to organize all this information, which is sort of widely out there in the web, into a knowledge base, which is well organized and crisp and machine readable, browsable, sort of a self-maintaining encyclopedia of human knowledge, right? So to organize all the human knowledge in the world into a form that can be analyzed by machines, that we can ask questions to, and machines will find the answers to these questions. That is one part of the AI dream that we have. And this knowledge base is what I'm talking about here, even though this is a very limited kind of knowledge base where there are just like three columns here, and each, we are just relating two entities to each other. So let me talk a little more details about this. So the first few triples that I have here are sort of what we would generally term as general knowledge. So facts about people and movies and popular culture, so to say. So general purpose knowledge bases, we do have quite a lot of them available. So these knowledge bases, again, are constructed from corpora like the web, right? So you could think of, these general purpose knowledge bases as having been extracted from a corpus of web documents or corpus of text documents and so on. Now, these are not the only kind of triples that you can extract. You can be very specific in the domain from which you want to extract these triples from. So here I have about 4 triples from the domain of computer science. So here you have entities which are specific to computer science, so topological sorting, group testing, gigabit internet, and so on. And these entities are related to classes of entities or other entities through certain kinds of relationships. So here we are saying that topological sorting is a type of graph algorithm, right? And gigabit Ethernet is a high-speed form of the Ethernet. And IronPython is an adaptation of Python. So these triples here are very specific to the computer science domain. And the relationships here are also very specific to the computer science domain as well. So here is another set of triples that I have, which are basically what can be regarded as opinions about political topics. So here the entities on this side, on the left side, are different kinds of stakeholders. So these are politicians like Barack Obama, Donald Trump, or countries. It could be entities like the UN and so on. And each of them holds an opinion on a political topic, right? So Brexit is a political topic that saw a lot of debate in the last 2-3 years. Illegal immigration, military action in Libya, which is a little old now, but at the time it was a really hot topic that was being debated. We have this predicate which relates these stakeholders with these political topics through exactly two relations, either support or oppose. So Barack Obama supports military action in Libya. UK supports Brexit while Scotland opposes Brexit. So a very coarse kind of opinions are being captured here, which basically relate a bunch of stakeholders, political stakeholders, to political topics. And again, this is very specific to the domain of politics, right? So all these are political issues and political stakeholders. And then next, we have here triples from the biochemical engineering domain. So in the biochemical engineering domain, we have entities such as these microbes. Pseudomonas is a microbe, and hydrocarbon degradation is a process that occurs. And in the object side of it, you can again have other microbes, other kinds of processes. But in addition, we also have entities like the environment and chemicals and so on. And these entities or classes of entities are related to each other through certain kinds of relationships or predicates. So we are saying here that this Pseudomonas, this is a microbe that is found in this particular environment, which is the sea. And we are saying that this hydrocarbon degradation is a process that occurs in this particular environment, right? So these are all facts. Probably I will not be able to explain exactly how significant these facts are because I'm a computer scientist, but for a biochemical engineer to organize the information that he or she has in this systematic way might be quite helpful. And finally, down here, I have another kind of triples, which are basically events. So just a couple of examples here on the Pulwama attack, which targeted the CRPF personnel, and it was orchestrated by JEM and so on. So these again are very specific to the news domain, and they're a very specific kind of triple which correspond to events. So when I talk about knowledge bases, what I'm basically talking about is this table which has 3 columns: subject, predicate, and object. And we are going to extract these kinds of triples, either general knowledge triples or triples from very specific domains such as computer science or biochemical engineering and so on. And this is what a knowledge base is. And as I mentioned before, this is a very sort of limited definition of a knowledge base. But we will see that even with this simple definition, we can make use of this knowledge base in a variety of different ways. So let's just look at some of the issues with this knowledge base first, right? So the first thing that we need to consider, so just remember that this knowledge base has to be extracted from something that looks like this, a corpus of all sorts of documents, right? So here are some of the challenges in using the knowledge base. So if it come to us really clean, that is one thing, but often when we do this extraction or this construction of knowledge bases, there are all kinds of issues that we need to deal with. So the very first of them is to identify canonical names for the entities and relations. So we might have multiple documents about, let's say, Albert Einstein, and we are extracting facts about Albert Einstein. So for example, we might have a sentence saying Albert Einstein was born in Germany, and that is good. It's a nice, simple sentence from which we can extract the triple Albert Einstein born in Germany. So that is a triple that we can easily extract. But further down in the document, Albert Einstein might simply be referred to as Einstein by his last name, right? So we as readers, we know that Einstein and Albert Einstein are probably the same person, but we have to ensure that our machinery or our software that we write in order to extract these knowledge bases also treat Albert Einstein and Einstein as the same person. And of course, Albert Einstein and Einstein are probably the same person, but they need not be the same person either, right? So there might be other people with the last name Einstein, and it really depends on the context from which we are extracting our triples. So determining that Albert Einstein and Einstein are the same person, and deciding that we want to represent Albert Einstein, the entity, as Albert underscore Einstein is canonicalization, and that's a decision that we want to make. And similarly, we have relations. So for example, discovered, invented, and developed, we might say that all these three different relationships are very close to each other. They mean almost the same. So maybe in the knowledge base, we should represent it as a single relation with one canonical name. Alternatively, we can also say that they're slightly different from each other. So why not just leave them as they are? So discovered is a separate predicate, invented is a separate predicate, developed is a separate predicate. So simply trying to come up with the canonical names for the entities and relations is a challenging task. So the next thing that is very interesting is to figure out is sort of a philosophical question as well, whether the triples that we have extracted into our knowledge base are true or not. And there are two aspects to this. One is looking at the extraction accuracy. So often you come across sentences which are very long and complicated, and trying to build these NLP tools which will correctly extract the triples from them can lead to lots of errors. So one thing that we have to be careful about is that the knowledge base may have these incorrect extractions simply because our machinery is not good enough yet. But the philosophical aspect comes when we say whatever we have extracted, is it actually true, right? So there's a couple of examples that are here. So first triple here simply says Spielberg directed Schindler. Now we know that this Schindler is not quite correct. It should be Schindler's List. And it's probably the case that there is the extraction accuracy is quite low because it did not extract this triple in a correct way. But what about this next triple, right? So many of you might know that when Elvis Presley passed away in the US, there were lots of conspiracy theories saying that Elvis had not really passed away and that he had gone into hiding somewhere and he was still alive and so on. And there were lots of these articles and blogs and all sorts of things that were coming up, which had lots of speculation about where he might actually be. And here is an extraction which simply says Elvis Presley lives on Mars, right? For normal people, this is sort of a crazy kind of thing to assume that it is true. But you will notice that when you're doing automatic extractions, this is a perfectly accurate extraction, right? It's just that the source from which we have done this extraction is completely unreliable. It's probably some nutcase who has written this blog, but we made this very correct extraction, right? So we have this in our knowledge base, even though it is not a true fact that we can use for any interesting purpose. Okay, so next we have a pair of triples. Manmohan Singh is a finance minister. Manmohan Singh is a prime minister. Now, both of these triples are true, but they're true only at very specific time periods, right? So Manmohan Singh was not a finance minister always, nor was he the prime minister always, but within very specific time periods, this was actually true. And in fact, this kind of triple highlights this next fact, which is that binary relations are not sufficient. So because this knowledge base has, the subject and object and the predicate in between, this predicate is actually relating exactly two entities to each other. So that's a binary predicate or a binary relation here. But when we have, when we need to specify that a particular triple is true only at a very specific time period, then we see that just having these triples is not sufficient at all, right? So here is an example, another example. Einstein in 1921 won the Nobel Prize, right? So this is something that requires at least a 4-tuple to express. So it is not possible to do it as a binary predicate because there are 3 pieces of information that need to be related to each other. And I think it's quite intuitive to understand that there is a lot of text that cannot be expressed as triples at all. So that is a limitation that we sort of accepted. Even though we call this a knowledge base, it's limited in this sense because even if we have something that's very precise, right? So Einstein in 1921 won the Nobel Prize. It's a very precise statement that can be represented as entities and relationships among them, but we cannot do it as a triple at all. So in that way, we have to accept the fact that the knowledge base, at least the knowledge base that we are dealing with in this talk, cannot express everything that we would like to express. And finally, this is something that I will not be touching upon in the talk again, which is the issue of how to evaluate a knowledge base once we have extracted it. So we might come up with lots of different techniques to extract these triples, and we have made a knowledge base of our own. But we need to now measure how good this knowledge base is. And typically, there are 2 metrics that are useful here, which is the precision and the recall, right? So precision is still possible to do it. Precision simply says we have extracted a bunch of triples. How many of these triples are actually correct, right? And correct, we will have to define, usually we define correctness as extraction accuracy. So if the extraction accuracy is right, then we know that the triple has been extracted correctly, right? So how many of our triples are correct? That is the precision of our knowledge base. And how many possible correct triples have we extracted? That is the recall of the knowledge base. Now, typically these knowledge bases have several thousands of triples. Otherwise, it's too small a knowledge base. If there are like 100 triples, then you can just look through all of them yourself and calculate the precision. But typically, some of the publicly available knowledge bases, they have millions of triples. And even the things that we might do, at least which we have done in our team, they usually contain thousands of triples. So the typical way we try to evaluate how good the knowledge base is we sample the triples. Like we take a 1% or 2% sample of triples and then ask users to manually go through each triple and say whether that extraction is correct or not. So that is how we sort of calculate the precision and we extrapolate it to the entire knowledge base. So precision is possible in a certain sense. But recall is much trickier because there is sort of no way to know whether all the information that was possible to be extracted has been extracted, right? So recall basically says how many possible correct triples have we extracted? Well, we don't even know how many possible correct triples are there. So typically the corpus would consist of thousands and thousands of documents, right? And there is no way to know how many triples are there in this entire corpus. And another important thing to notice is that the corpus itself might not be complete, right? So you can never really say whether you have extracted all the things that you could possibly extract. So when we are looking at the goodness of a knowledge base, we typically look at precision, but not at the recall aspect of it at all. So I made a small note of this down here. So we already said binary relations are not sufficient. So depending on the application, other things are added to this knowledge base. So we can have knowledge bases with timestamps. So as I said here, we would have very timestamps for each of these relations. That would be an extra column, timestamp column here. And we could have provenance, which simply tells you from where, what the source is for this particular extraction. So it might be a document on the web, and so maybe you store the URL of it, or maybe you just store the entire document and say that I downloaded this document on this particular day, and this extra information, this is the provenance, you would store it as additional information in the knowledge base. And similarly, location. So this is especially important for events, right? So you need both the time and location of the event, so to fully express what this event was about. Because an event usually occurs in a specific place at a specific time. So you would need both timestamp and location. And then you would have textual context. So here is an example of where that might make sense, right? So when we first had our nuclear tests, United States opposed our nuclear tests, and they sanctioned us. But after a while, they relented, and then they supported our security scenario. They had to respect that, and they supported us. So these two triples are perfectly accurate in their extraction, but they don't make sense unless you say what the context is. So context here could simply highlight what is the news article or what is the sentence from which this particular triple was extracted from, and what was it that this particular triple was extracted from. So context again is another layer of extending the KBs to make it more readable or more sensible to human beings. And of course, nested information are possible. Similarly, similar to having 4 tuples or 5 tuples, you could have nested information, and you can think of a lot more different kinds of ways in which this information can be expressed in an accurate way. But as I mentioned, in this talk, we are only concerned with the knowledge bases with these 3 columns: subject, predicate, object, and we will see that even with this very limited sense of a knowledge base, there are quite a lot of different things that we can do with it. One of the things that we can do is to query the knowledge bases, right? So obviously, we went to all this trouble constructing this knowledge base. So by the way, the bulk of the talk is going to focus on constructing the knowledge base. Here, I'm just sort of laying the basis for why these knowledge bases are important and what can we do with them. So as I was saying, organizing information is enough, but is not enough, because that's a good thing to do, organizing information, but we are doing it for a specific purpose, which is, and one of the purposes could be that we want answers to certain kinds of questions, right? So here are a bunch of questions that I have listed here. So list the Nobel Prize winning theoretical physicist born in Germany, right? So this query, the results of this query, so basically this is asking for a bunch of physicists. They should be theoretical physicists. They should have been born in Germany, and they should have won the Nobel Prize. Now, we can, of course, use Google to answer this question, except that we are going to have to do a sort of filtering and aggregation step on top of the results that Google returns. So Google is going to return, probably many different pages about theoretical physicists, many different pages about physicists who have won the Nobel Prize, and physicists born in Germany, and so on. So there are lots of different documents that Google will return, which are relevant to this query, but we need to sort of go into each of these documents and extract the information that we need. We need to check, okay, this is a document about Albert Einstein, but first let me check if Albert Einstein is a theoretical physicist born in Germany who won the Nobel Prize, right? So you would need to do this, manually go into each document, extract the information out, and then construct the list that you want, which is the list of Nobel Prize winning physicists. But if you had this kind of knowledge base where the information was already organized, then it is a straightforward thing to express this requirement as a query. So there is a very specific query language called Sparkle, which is used to query knowledge bases. It's very similar to SQL, right? But except it is geared up for this 3-column table. So you would basically match things like, I want a physicist who was born in Germany. So you would match this first triple here, right? So physicist Albert Einstein, born in Germany, they match. So Albert Einstein is a potential candidate. And Albert Einstein is also a theoretical physicist. And Albert Einstein also won the Hubbard Nobel Prize, right? So you might form like three lists. One list is of people born in Germany, another a list of theoretical physicists, and a third list of who won the Nobel Prize in physics. So the intersection of these three lists is going to give you the answer to this query. And this is quite nicely expressible, as I said, in the Sparkle query language, which is a query language for querying these knowledge bases. And similarly, which comedy films have won the Academy Award for Best Film? Of course, we can query Google, but this information is going to be distributed in lots of different documents, which we have to put together into a list. But if it was already organized in this way, in triple format, this question as well is simply about constructing a bunch of lists and doing an intersection of those lists. So which films are comedy films? That would be one list. Which films have won the Academy Award? That would be the other list. And then you do an intersection of these two lists and you have the answer to your query here. Now this third kind of query is a little different. So this asks what are some commonalities between L.K. Advani, Somnath Chatterjee and Manmohan Singh, right? Now this is not something that you can sort of express in a very precise query language because this question itself is a little vague. There are some, I mean, as human beings, we can look at this question and we can come up with answers like, okay, all three of them are men, all three of them were in parliament, all three are politicians, and so on. And all three have won the best parliamentarian award as well. So these are commonalities among these three people, but this is not a query that is precisely expressible in a query language. So we call these queries as keyword queries, and if there is time, I will talk a little more about these keyword queries. But basically what this query is asking is for the system to look at this knowledge base and try to form interconnections between these three different entities, right? And there are more such examples here. So did both Barack Obama and Donald Trump support the Iraq war? Again, that's a very straightforward query. You just have to look at Iraq war in this column. And you have to look at Barack Obama and Donald Trump in this column and just see what the relationship between Iraq war and Barack Obama is and what the relationship between Donald Trump and Iraq war is, and you get your answer for that. And finally here, this is another interesting query, very specific to the biochemical domain, which says what kind of chemical processes involving acetone occur in the sea. Again, this is something that you can precisely express in a query language and involves just matching the correct kinds of relationships and entities in this set of triples that we have in our knowledge base. Right. So this kind of question answering is one of the really interesting and quite useful application that we can have of organizing our information in this form. So, but that's not the only thing that we can do. There are a lot more different kinds of applications that we can have where, this knowledge base is just going to be a component in the application. So in the previous application of just querying the knowledge base, I mean, the knowledge base itself was the main player, so to say. So everything was happening over the knowledge base. But I just wanted to talk about applications where the knowledge base could just be a sort of component or a helping module to in a larger application. So this part, as I mentioned before, is a computer science knowledge base, right? Concepts related to computer science. And I'll just talk briefly about an application that we had over that knowledge base called about academic search. So academic search, I'm sure, is something that all of you would have done, and it typically involves trying to find research articles, right? So you find a new concept or you want to study. Yeah. Did someone have a question? Did someone have a question?
No,
Okay,
ma'am.
I cannot hear anything. I'm just gonna go ahead.
You may proceed, madam.
Yeah. So academic search is simply searching for research articles on some new topic that you came across, or trying to get some basics on things that you want to learn about, right? So a typical example, how can I search for research articles discussing applications of autoencoders, right? So this is an example of academic search, and of course we already have websites like Semantic Scholar and Google Scholar, which help us to do this academic search in a very nice way. So here, for example, I have this autoencoder. I want to look at research articles related to autoencoders. So I can just go to Semantic Scholar and enter my keyword.
Yeah.
Okay, I think someone has their mic on.
3240 आई थी.
Right. Okay, so I have this search box into which I enter autoencoder, and it returns a bunch of results, which are actually quite good. All of these are research articles, and there are different ways in which you can sort them. You can even have filters like show me only those articles within the last 5 years, and lots of filters that you can apply on this set of articles, which is well and good. Now, suppose I want not just autoencoders, but I'm interested in a very specific aspect of autoencoders. So let's say I'm specifically looking for papers on algorithms for autoencoders, maybe training algorithms for autoencoders, right? So the usual way we go about this is to simply add a few more search terms in the search box. So here I've added autoencoder algorithm. And if I do that search, you will see that I get a bunch of results. But this set of results is not really different from this set of results. So there is some difference in ranking, but these two results are pretty nearly the same list of articles, which does not really serve my purpose because it's not autoencoders. It's a very specific aspect of autoencoders that I'm looking for. So here is what I would ideally like to get, right? So these are results from the system that we built for academic search. So here are the queries that I have, queries concepts that I'm interested in, right? So autoencoders is what I started off with. And here I have the aspect of that particular query that I'm interested in. So autoencoder applications, autoencoder algorithms, autoencoder implementation. So suppose we wanted to support this kind of search. So autoencoder application, the top result that we got is exploring autoencoders for unsupervised feature selection, which is very clearly an application of autoencoders. Similarly, for the algorithm aspect, the top result we got is training stacked denoising autoencoders for representation learning. Now, this has to do with the training of the autoencoder, which fits in correctly with the algorithm aspect. And for implementation, we got parallelizing the sparse autoencoder, which is again a very implementation specific aspect of autoencoders. So this was the top result, right? So the application that we were interested in is if a user is interested in not just the concept here, but a very specific aspect of it, how can we go about implementing such a search? And this is where we had the idea of using knowledge bases. Right. So if you're wondering what does academic search, all this search have to do with knowledge bases, then this is exactly what we used knowledge bases for. So clearly, autoencoder application or autoencoder algorithm is not sufficient. We need to add more terms. So we need to expand the query with more terms in order to get these results that we want. So using KBs is one of the ideas that we tried. So we had this knowledge base, we call it Technobase, which is a knowledge base of computer science concepts. And certain terms from the knowledge base might directly tell you whether something is an application of an autoencoder, right? So you would be extracting these triples from all sorts of documents, and maybe one of the documents you extracted XXX is an application of autoencoder, in which case you know that XXX might be a good candidate for query expansion with the query. For the query with just the autoencoder, you can add XXX as a expansion. So this was some of the ideas that we tried using the knowledge base for query expansion. So here are a few more applications of KBs, right? So another application that we were looking at is this problem of finding prerequisites. So very often when we are reading papers, we come across concepts that we have no clue about, and then at least what.
Sai Reddy kada Control Z. Mr. Sai Reddy.
Okay. Yeah. So whenever we are looking at papers or books, we come across concepts that we don't quite understand. And now that we have the internet, one of the first things that at least I do is to go to Google and give this term as a search term, right? So what are the prerequisites for learning about HMM? So I need to learn about HMM. I go to Google and type HMM, right? And then usually the first result is the Wikipedia page of hidden Markov models. And then I click there and I look at the first paragraph, and there are like a whole bunch of terms there which I don't understand at all. Understand what this is, then I click on that, which takes me to another page. And there again, there are terms that I don't understand. So I click again. So soon enough, just get lost in this maze of clicks and maze of links. So what we wanted to do is to try to come up with a system which, if you give HMM as your query, would give you a graph of prerequisites for HMMs. And in order to do this, we again made use of this knowledge base where all the concepts of computer science are organized in a systematic way. So if you want to read more about it, we have published papers about it. I can give you references at the end. So another kind of application, we had this opinion base or a knowledge base of opinions here. One of the applications that we can we have here is to look at news bias. So, for example, does the newspaper The Hindu support India's China policy? Right. So suppose we wanted to answer this question, one of the things that we might do is to sort of look at the various articles that The Hindu has published and see, what kind of people they are giving voice to, right? So there might be a lot of people who vehemently oppose India's China policy at the moment, and maybe saying that the Prime Minister is not taking this seriously enough. So typically we would extract triples which say, so XXX opposes Modi's policy, or one obvious example is Rahul Gandhi opposes Modi's policy, right? And we might find that the Hindu actually publishes quite a lot of people who are opposed to the China policy. But of course, because it's a newspaper, it will also publish people who are in support of the policy, who are saying that the army is doing a great job, the government is going in the right direction, and so on. So in order to actually determine whether there is a bias or not, we might just want to check, okay, how many people have they published which oppose this policy? How many people have they said support the policy, right? So if an overwhelming majority of the articles are giving voice to the people who support the policy, then we can say, yeah, it's not like there is a 50-50 split among people who support and oppose. The Hindu gives voice to mainly the people who support India's China policy, right? So we can try to determine news bias, provided we have this kind of extractions done, right? And finally, here is a very interesting example on scientific question answering with reasoning, right? So this was a project that we were doing with ExxonMobil, and the actual question that they wanted answered was which microbes are anaerobic. So their problem was that there was a lot of research that was being published in the biochemical domain, where people did surveys of many different kinds of locations. And one of the things that they wanted to extract, the information that they wanted to extract from these publications, is to figure out which microbes are anaerobic, because if the presence of certain anaerobic microbes indicates the presence or absence of oil in that place. So they would know where to focus the resources and so on. So of course, one of the easiest way to do this is if you had that information directly in your knowledge base. So if in a particular research paper it said this microbe XXX is anaerobic, then you would have extracted that and you would have put it in your knowledge base and you're done. But typically that is not the way it happens, because there is no research paper which directly gives you this information. Instead, it has to be inferred from these bits and pieces of information that we have here. So you would have things like, this microbe is present in a particular kind of environment, or this particular process was noticed in this particular environment. You have these bits and pieces of information, and you have to reason on top of them, saying, okay, I know that this was true, and then this was true, and then this was true. Therefore, I can conclude that this particular microbe is anaerobic, right? So again, the knowledge base is just a sort of a small component. The actual big component is the reasoning part, where an expert comes and tells you, if you find these kinds of information in your knowledge base, then this is how you are going to conclude that a microbe is aerobic or anaerobic in nature. Okay, so that's quite a lot of information about how KBs can be used, not just for question answering, but also in all kinds of different applications. But the organization of this entire space of information, right? That is the interesting part of it. In the rest of the talk, I will be talking about how to do this construction of knowledge bases so that we can use it in these kinds of applications. So one of the things that I want to point out is, I think I mentioned in the very first slide, we do have general purpose knowledge bases which have, so-called general knowledge. There are some really big knowledge bases which are available out there that you can just download and start using. So knowledge bases like Yago and DBpedia and so on. But my focus in the talk is to look at these very specific domain purpose, domain specific knowledge bases, which are quite interesting in their own right. And they require special attention simply because the techniques that work for these general purpose knowledge bases may or may not work for these domain specific knowledge bases. So let me start off with some general principles for how to go about constructing a domain specific knowledge base. So I'm sure, computer science people, whenever we collaborate with, other departments, one of the problems that we have is we don't know what that subject is all about. So here, for example, biochemical engineering, I have no idea what the subject is about. So there is a requirement for actually talking to the people who are experts in that particular area, right? And they are the people who are going to tell us about all these different aspects that I have listed here. And one of the most important things is to look at the sources from which the knowledge base has to be extracted, right? So if it's a general purpose knowledge base or even computer science, we can do it ourselves. I mean, we know what kinds of sources are interesting, but once it becomes specialized to a particular domain, then it's a subject expert who can tell us these things, right? So typically, sources are of two types. So this is like a very broad distinction. One is structured sources, and the other is unstructured source. So structured sources are things like Wikipedia and IMDb, where every page on this domain or on this website has a structure which is repeated from page to page. So if you look at a few pages of Wikipedia, then you know exactly how to write the software to parse that Wikipedia page and to extract certain things from it. Same with IMDb and same with certain kinds of domain-specific websites. So one of the websites I'll be talking about is Webopedia, which we used for the construction of the computer science knowledge base, right? So some of these websites, so this is basically a website which gives you lots of different definitions of terms. And these definitions are always organized in the same way. So you can easily write a wrapper to extract information from many pages in Webopedia. So this is what I mean by structured sources. So that is in contrast to unstructured sources, where at least for the purposes of this talk, I'm only talking about textual sources. Of course, unstructured sources could also include images and videos and audio clips and so on. We are not going to talk about that, but mainly looking at textual sources, and they're of very much varying quality, right? So newspaper articles, typically you expect them to have very high standard of, the language should be very high standard, right? And especially when we are doing extraction from English language, English language sources, then some newspapers are better than others. And in fact, newspapers are the best sources because grammatically they are very good. And that's in contrast to things like reviews and tweets, which are, there is no grammar to them. All sorts of, code switching happens. There could be in multiple languages. And, they don't typically present factual information in a grammatically correct format. And this makes a difference simply because, our NLP tools are not good enough to handle this, all these kinds of variations. So trying to figure out what are the high quality unstructured sources is going to be a challenge on its own. And sometimes the domain experts can help us to determine these kinds of sources. So source identification, that's a big deal. So we need to choose our sources correctly from which we are going to construct the knowledge base. Okay, so lots of sort of background music to the talk.
I muted them, madam. We can continue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, so after source identification comes the actual process of constructing the KBs. So the typical thing that I follow is to first acquire a list of entities that are interesting, right? So you want to know what kind of entities your knowledge base is going to contain, entities and classes of entities. This includes both. So it's for our own understanding what are the kinds of entities that we want to extract and what our knowledge base is going to contain, right? And this extraction again can be done from structured sources, like when we identified the sources, we had structured and unstructured. So entities typically you can extract from structured sources. So I'll have examples of all this in a couple of slides. So this is just like at an abstract level, I'm telling you the procedure that we follow. And so again, if you have structured sources, the main challenge is to simply design a proper wrapper, right? Especially if it's a website like Wikipedia, right? So one thing about Wikipedia is that if you look at the title of the Wikipedia page, that's almost always going to be a proper entity. So you have Wikipedia pages about Albert Einstein, you have Wikipedia pages about Germany, India, Iraq war. So all of these are, if you just look at the title of the Wikipedia page, then that is already an entity. And depending on your application or your domain, that might be interesting to you. And how do you extract this list of entities from Wikipedia? All you need to do is write the appropriate wrapper, because the page is always structured in the same way. So you just need to write a program which will always extract the title of that Wikipedia page, and you already have your entity with you. Now, entities are also available from unstructured sources. So if everything was available from structured sources, that would be great. But very often, we will have to extract entities from unstructured sources. And here we need some NLP to help us out, including part of speech tagging, right? So part of speech tagging, there are certain heuristics that you can use on top of this to sort of infer that something is an entity that is interesting, right? So for example, noun phrases are typically entities that are interesting. And saying that noun phrases are entities is a heuristic that you would use. And you would hope that your pause tagger is good enough to identify all the nouns that are in the sentence that you're currently processing. And the types of entities itself, we may know them ahead of time or we may not know them. I'll show you examples of what this might entail. And finally, of course, there is a cleanup step because you typically process hundreds of documents or thousands of documents to extract these entities. So there are lots of entities which are wasteful or which are incorrect, which are duplicates. So there is always this cleanup step needed to remove all the bad extractions from here. Now, once we have the set of entities, now any relation or any predicate that we extract is going to be between entities from our list. So this is a dictionary of entities that we acquire here. And in the relations, we start identifying relations between the entities from our entity list or our entity dictionary. Now, again, relations are extracted from both structured and unstructured sources. And we may know the relations beforehand or we may not know them. So I will come to examples of how this might work in some of the things that I talk about. And the same kind of cleanup that we do for entities, we also may have to do for relations. Simply because the same relation is expressed in multiple different ways, as we saw before. We saw an example of this. So we'll have to identify these duplicate relations, and we have to say, okay, this is going to be the canonical form and so on, right? So there is a cleanup step required for this as well. So one round of entities extraction, one round of relations extraction, and then we can start with the refinement process. So this is like the first raw knowledge base that we extract, and then we start to refine this knowledge base. And there are some quite interesting techniques here. I don't think I'll be talking a lot about the refinement step, but it's basically about looking at the knowledge base that you have currently and inferring new relations out of it. So there are some recent neural network methods that help us do this. And we can feed back the relations and entities that we have derived in one round of extraction and improve our extractions through this feedback. So I'm just not going to talk a lot about it because there won't be time. In fact, I'm already like 1 hour into the talk. So refinement, it's very interesting, but I think the main focus is going to be on extracting these entities and relations here. Right. So how do we apply those general purpose principles for each of the different KBs that I talked about? So here I just made a chart of how we could go about doing it. So for example, the opinion base, which simply consisted of political entities, whether they support or oppose a political topic, right? So that was the opinion base. And the sources that we used for that were newspaper articles. Again, as I said, using newspaper articles is good because NLP tools are likely to work better on these newspaper articles. And Wikipedia was a source, and another source was Debatepedia. So Debatepedia is another website just like Wikipedia, except that Debatepedia mainly deals with controversial topics. So since we wanted this opinion base to have controversial political topics, Wikipedia was not sufficient, right? Because Wikipedia has all kinds of topics. So we had Debatepedia as a filter on top of it. I think someone else still has their mic open. If that can be muted, that would be good. It's very disturbing. Yeah, that's a lot better. Or not. Okay. So the entity extraction techniques that we did, there were of two kinds. So Yago is a general purpose knowledge base that is available. You can download it. So we got names of certain entities from Yago, interesting entities from Yago. And what we also wanted for this opinion base are topics. And from Yago, we knew what the type of entity we wanted was, right? So we wanted people and organizations. So those were the two types of entities that we wanted. But the topics, we don't really know what the type is or whether it even makes sense to have any sort of type associated with these topics. So topics are things like Brexit and military action on Libya. These are topics that we wanted to extract. And the best we could do is to extract phrases corresponding to these topics, right? And then the relation extraction, it is sort of simple because we know that we want to extract exactly two kinds of relations, support and oppose. So only two kinds of relations. And these were from unstructured sources, which is mainly the newspaper articles which are reporting on these topics. We need to extract these relations from those sources. Refinement, I'm just gonna not talk about. Similarly, for Technobase, we had Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is sort of the default source for many of these extractions or constructions. And Webopedia and TechTarget are specifically computer science related or IT related websites from which we got quite a lot of information. And they were structured sources because they're organized in a way that makes it easy to extract the information from them. So writing wrappers is easier using these websites. And another source that is very specific to computer science, we're looking at online textbooks. There were some PDFs that we could find online on subjects like operating systems and so on. So we had these online textbooks as well as one of the sources of information. So again, for the entity extraction, we had no idea what the types were going to be. So it's just like if something is an entity, just extract it. And we did this from Wikipedia, Webopedia, TechTarget, and also looking at the indexes of these online textbooks, right? So in the index of these textbooks, you usually find topics which are interesting. And in fact, you usually find these topics in the table of contents as well. But with a little bit of engineering, you can nicely determine what is an entity, what is not. So we made use of these online textbooks in this way to extract a list of or a dictionary of entities. Now, again, once we have the dictionary of entities, we extract relations between them. And here it was different kinds of scenarios that we considered. One was looking at structured sources and known relations. So known relations here simply means that we were able to list down a specific set of relations that we knew that we wanted to extract. Like, for example, type of was a relation that we knew we wanted to extract. So we wanted to, so whatever we listed down, we call them simply as known relations. And from these structured sources like Wikipedia or Webopedia, and also these known relations from unstructured sources. So if there was a textual source from which we could extract type of, we wanted to know, we wanted to do that as well. And of course, there are several cases where, obviously we cannot list down all the relations that are interesting. There are only a limited set that we can list down. So the remaining relations are unknown relations. We have no idea what these relations are, but there is a way to extract them. There is a way to say that they are relations and extract them from both structured sources as well as unstructured sources. So this relation extraction was quite comprehensive between known relations, unknown relations, structured and unstructured sources. And similarly for the biochemical KB and the event base and so on, I won't go into the details of those. So that whole thing was it seems was the introduction. So let me quickly get to at least one of these topics, which is building an opinion base, just to give you an idea of how we make use of those principles. So usually when we start to construct a knowledge base, it's with a certain goal in mind. And sometimes these goals are relevant, and sometimes they're not really. It doesn't matter what the goal is, you're going to construct the KB in the same way. In any case, for the opinion base, we had a specific goal in mind, which was to map out the landscape of political opinions on controversial topics, right? So it was important that the topic be controversial. That is, there is a lot of different, lots of debate around the topic. And the stakeholders are the politicians and political institutions who hold some sort of opinion on it. So that is basically this first row here, right? So we started looking at newspaper clippings like this, right? So the idea was that, I mean, we all know this, politicians have opinions and they keep changing their opinions on things at the drop of a hat, right? And we can never remember what they had said and when they had said it, why they had said it, we have no idea. So one thing that can help us to actually analyze the changing opinions of politicians is to have this opinion base, to construct this opinion base. And we have plenty of source material for it, because all these newspaper articles, they talk about these controversial topics, right? So we just recognize that there are these issues and stakeholders, and just to map out what are all the different topics which are currently controversial or controversial in a particular period of time, and who stands where on that particular topic. So that's basically what we wanted to do. And we wanted to come up with an opinion base of this kind, right? So again, there are these three columns. Instead of calling them subject, predicate, object, I simply have said it is entity, polarity, and topic. So polarity is simply, there are just two polarities in our case. It is support or opposes. So you can look at it as positive or negative polarity here, right? And I sort of added this extra column here for better understanding, which is simply looking at the context from which this particular triple was extracted, right? So the first triple here is Dalai Lama supports Anna's anti-corruption movement. And there was some snippet from a particular newspaper, something like this: supporting Anna Hazare's anti-graft movement, Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, said something or did something. But basically from this particular snippet, we were able to extract this particular triple, right? Similarly, the second one, BJP supports Anna's anti-corruption movement, extending support to Anna Hazare's anti-graft crusade, right? So here already, the topic, we have canonicalized it as Anna's anti-corruption movement, but actually the wording here is anti-graft crusade in one case and anti-graft movement in the other case, right? So both of them canonicalized to this particular topic name, right? And yeah, so BJP president has been sort of abstracted out to just BJP supports the anti-corruption movement and so on. So you can see some of the challenges that we talked about coming into play right here. And opinion base can also go international, because we also have international newspapers, and stakeholders include people from all over the world, and topics could be of importance to a larger number of nations. But again, the polarity remains only supports and opposes, because we don't deal with any shade of opinion here at all. So the opinion network can be regarded as a graph as well. So every edge here is basically a triple in the knowledge base. So here the each edge is annotated with O or S O is for opposes, S is for supports. So you have Anna Hazare opposes FDI in retail, Angela Merkel opposes no-fly zone, Angela Merkel supports Gaddafi's response to civil war, and so on. So we have entities, and we have these opinions, and we have these topics or facets. And on top of it, we can build this topic hierarchy as well. So this is strictly not part of the opinion base that I showed you, but it might easily be a part of it as well. So this is just a hierarchy of, the Libyan civil war of 2011 basically has as its subtopics the war crimes in Libya, where Gaddafi was alleged to have bombed his own citizens. And then there is the no-fly zone, which was imposed by a lot of these Western powers. And the Libyan civil war is a subtopic of illegal immigration. And this might be a little counterintuitive, but this was indeed the case because there were lots of refugees fleeing the civil war here and pouring into the neighboring countries. And that was illegal immigration because they obviously didn't wait for visas and so on. So this was basically what we wanted to build with our opinion base. And we had this 4 stages to do that. We called it opinionated. And the first step here was to identify candidate opinion snippets. So if you recollect, what we had was to newspaper articles mainly as the source of our opinions, right? So first of all, how do we even find whether an opinion is being expressed? So candidate opinion snippets, this module simply identifies those sentences which give us the sentences which have some expression of support or opposition to a particular topic. So this was quite straightforward to do with a keyword search. I'll talk about it in the next slide. So once we had a whole bunch of candidate opinion snippets, we did the entity and facet extraction. So for example, if this was our candidate snippet, Afghan president says he supports talks with the Taliban, then the entity we are interested in is Afghan president, and the facet or the topic we are interested in is talks with the Taliban. And the fact that there is a support keyword here, it's automatic, the polarity is automatic. So Afghan president supports talks with the Taliban, right? And once the entity and facet are extracted, we need canonical forms for these entities and facets. So at the time this was happening in 2012, the Afghan president was Hamid Karzai. So Afghan president was canonicalized to Hamid Karzai. Same with just Karzai. So in the same news article, you could see that Hamid Karzai was referred to just by his last name. So we had to canonicalize that to Hamid Karzai. And talks with Taliban is canonicalized to Taliban negotiations, and many different ways of expressing Taliban negotiations, including Taliban talks, talks with Taliban, as I said earlier, and so on. So canonical forms for these entities as well as topics. And then everything is organized in this topic hierarchy. I'll briefly talk about how we do that. So Taliban negotiations and drone strikes, they're part of the Afghanistan war. Suicide bombings, part of the Iraq war, and both these wars are part of the war on terror. So that is the topic hierarchy that we want to do from all the extracted triples that we have. So let me go through each of the modules one by one. First is the acquisition of opinion snippets, right? So we had the web as our source, web in quotes because it was not the entire web. It was specifically a set of newspapers like Al Jazeera, CNN, and BBC. And Wikipedia, of course, as a sort of default source we always had. And the way we acquire these candidate snippets is to use seed phrases as queries. So phrases such as he supports or she supports, he voted for, he voted against. So these were seed phrases. And if you just go to Google and enter this query in quotes, you're likely to find snippets which are probably going to be opinion snippets. So he supports was exactly the keyword match for this particular snippet here. So Afghan president says he supports talks with the Taliban. So we had a whole bunch of seed phrases that we thought are going to be useful as queries that we can fire on the web for these particular newspaper websites, and we got a whole bunch of snippets, right? So we had things like a supporter of acknowledge that his support for all of these are keyword queries that we fired, and we got these sentences as candidate snippets, opinion snippets that from which we could potentially extract entities and relationships. Okay, so once we had that, we need to identify the entities and the facets. That was the next step. So the only way to do this, especially in this unstructured text, is to use NLP techniques and parse the sentences that we have. And specifically, we used dependency parsing. This is a kind of parsing which tells you the relationship between different pieces of text. So in particular, it tries to identify what the subject of the sentence is and what the object of the sentence is, right? So this dependency parsing, as with a lot of NLP tools, is not like 100% reliable. It's always subject to lots of errors. So on top of this dependency parsing, we had to use a lot of heuristics, right? So here are some examples of what we got. It's the same 3 snippets as in the previous slide. Now, for this first snippet, things are perfect because the parser has correctly identified John Kyle as the subject and Arizona immigration law as the object. And a supporter of obviously indicates the polarity. So the extraction entity and facet extraction are correct. And we have the polarity, which was part of our seed phrase anyway. So this is done. But that was the only easy part of it. The second part was not so simple, right? So here, Robert Gates is correctly identified as the subject, but the facet is completely, what it has identified as the object is not at all, a facet of this particular opinion that we want to extract. So this says Robert Gates, the US Defense Secretary, has acknowledged that projections that are based on proposed military timelines may not be accurate, but stressed that the Pentagon is not exempt from belt tightening because of its charge of defending the country. So, in fact, looking at this sentence in its entirety, I'm not even sure whether we can express a very precise opinion from this, right? Whether we can even, as human beings, when we read this, do we know exactly who is expressing an opinion? Yeah, we can say that Robert Gates is expressing an opinion, and we can say that he has agreed to something or supported something. But what that something is, it's all sort of caught up in this huge piece of text here. So even as human beings, we may find it difficult to sort of precisely say what is he expressing an opinion about. So that being the case, it's no surprise if an automated machinery like a dependency parser is going to fail there, right? And finally, here is another example where the facet is correctly identified, right? American strategy in Afghanistan is the topic, but the person expressing the opinion is not Mr. Gates. It's actually supposed to be David Cameron. And the dependency parser has sort of missed that completely, right? So the parsing itself, the NLP tools that we use can go wrong quite a bit. We can try to mitigate some of these errors by going with lots of heuristics and trying to do it, but you can always expect some part of the extractions that you do to be completely incorrect. But of course, it's been several years since we did this extractions. Maybe the tool quality has improved, but there are always going to be errors, and we just live with it. So once we have entities and facets, they are the raw facets and entities, right? So we just looked at the text, we parsed it, and we just said this piece of text is an entity, this piece of text is a facet, And now we have lots of those kinds of raw facets and entities, right? So entities like Gaddafi or Obama, US president, and facets, of course, are the more challenging part of it. UN mandate against Libya, use of force against Libyan civilians. So these are all topics which are interesting, but they need to be canonicalized, right? So, for example, military airstrikes on Libyan cities and coalition airstrikes on Libya, perhaps they're talking about the same topic and need to be expressed in a canonical way. So that is the next part of next module, which is to identify how to come up with canonical names for these entities and facets. For the entities, it was somewhat straightforward. So for this, we used Yago, where so basically Yago is derived from Wikipedia, right? And in Wikipedia, you can actually, when you look at the search box of Wikipedia and you type a query, like if you type Obama, right? Whether you type Obama or President Obama or Barack Hussein Obama, you always sort of get redirected to Barack Obama's homepage. So that's sort of the preferred meaning, which is also captured in Yago. So when we say Obama, President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, all of them are related to this canonical form, Barack Obama, through the means relation. So the very simple heuristic that we used is if a particular meaning was used a lot, then it was likely to be the correct meaning, right? So since Barack Obama had like 3 different phrases associated, connected to Barack Obama through the means relation, and Michelle Obama had only one such relation, we had this heuristic that Barack Obama is going to be the preferred meaning and just choose that as the canonical names. So quite often this does work out well, but if you're extracting entities which are the tail entities, right, which are not very popular, then this is not going to obviously work, and we need other kinds of techniques to determine what the correct canonical form should be. And in any case, canonical forms for entities was quite easy, but not for facets, right? So for facets, it's first of all, where do we even get candidate canonical facets? That was the first challenge. And that is why we went to Wikipedia, because it's a good source for these kind of labels that we wanted. So if you recall, I mentioned that, pages like Iraq War, I mean, if you look at the title of that page, then it is Iraq War, which is a proper topic on its own. And perhaps it's a canonical form for some of the topics that we talked about. In fact, there is even a page on military action on Libya, and there is a page on refugee crisis. All those things are separate pages on their own in Wikipedia. And therefore, these Wikipedia page titles could be good source for the canonical facet names. So that's why we used Wikipedia as a source for these canonical facets. The only issue was that the topics are not always controversial, which is why we had this Debatepedia in addition to Wikipedia, because whatever Debatepedia has, it is always a controversial topic, right? So Debatepedia is structured similarly to Wikipedia, except that the goal of this website is to sort of have these debates, both pro and con debates on various different topics. So if we looked at Debatepedia titles, right, the topics that Debatepedia has, then we are sure of having these controversial topics, because controversial topics are the only ones which have so much of debate on top of them. So we acquired labels from Debatepedia and then mapped them to Wikipedia, and we were able to get canonical forms for the entities and facets. And finally, once we have lots of canonical names for entities and facets, we want to also organize that in a topic hierarchy. That was the last part of this knowledge-based construction. And this is not something that is typically done for knowledge bases in general. But this topic hierarchy is a way of expressing the taxonomy of the knowledge base, so the type of relationship. So what is a type of what kind of thing. So this topic hierarchy is often interesting in the context of opinion base. It is a topic hierarchy. In the case of other knowledge bases, it might just be the taxonomy, the type of relationships or the type of hierarchy that you want to build. So in any case, for opinion bases, we had to be very specific in the way we construct this hierarchy. So first of all, these are all topics, canonicalized topics that we had, each node here. And basically, we constructed a complete graph of excuse me. So basically, we constructed a complete graph of these nodes. So the complete graph is not shown here. Only a certain selected edges are shown here. But that is because some of the edges were removed from that complete graph. And the way we did that is to identify something called the strength of relationships between these nodes. So if you had Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israel's weapons of mass destruction, these are the two nodes that you have. These are basically two topics in Wikipedia. Then the strength of the relationship depends on the number of common subcategories these two pages have. So in the Wikipedia page, if you scroll down to the bottom, you see that each page belongs to a number of different categories, right? So the hypothesis was that if two pages had a lot of categories in common, then those two pages were very close to each other in topic. So we had each of these edges basically had a weight associated with them based on the number of common subcategories that they had. And each node had a weight of its own depending on the number of raw facets mapped to it. So basically saying how important is this node in our knowledge base. So once we had this constructed, we used a graph coarsening algorithm. So this is basically an algorithm which will cluster your graph into similar nodes. And running this graph coarsening algorithm gives us clusters of this kind. These clusters are basically similar topics, right? And one thing that is not shown in this picture is that each cluster is connected to the other clusters, because a node here might be connected to a node there, a node there might be connected to a node here, and so on. So there are lots of interconnections here which are not shown. Only the clusters are shown, right? But we can construct a hierarchy from this by looking at how many edges go from this cluster to this cluster as opposed to this cluster to this cluster, right? So if there are a lot of edges going from here to here, then that means that one of them has to be at the top of the hierarchy and the other at the other as a subtopic in the hierarchy. So this is how we organize the topics. And
Madam, I want to get one small clarification. Hierarchy means, as you told, that is having certain relation. That relation where you are shown in that graph maybe changes from lower to higher, or top to bottom, or what horizontal to vertical. That little bit confusion, madam. That knowledge base process,
it should go like this. It should go like this. So it's like all the facets, raw facets which are clustered in this set of nodes, they have a lot of edges to this cluster here, Afghanistan war. Therefore, this comes at the bottom, that comes on the top. So here it is canonicalized. So these names are canonicalized, but inside this you have a lot of different raw facets that you have mapped to these drone strikes, right? So one thing is you have clustered them, and you have clustered nodes regarding the Afghanistan war as well. So to determine whether Afghanistan war comes on top or drone strikes has to come on top, you just look at the number of edges from this cluster to this cluster, as well as this cluster to this cluster, and then you make the decision to say, okay, Afghanistan war should be on top because the number of edges from there to here are more.
Hello, madam.
Yeah, is that clear?
Madam, yeah, madam, I have one more doubt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, madam. Actually, you were using knowledge graphs based on this message from the newspaper or internet news or international any TV news. I think Afghan president says he supports talks with Taliban. Where you collected from that message, madam? Actually.
Yeah, this is just firing on Google.
Okay.
And NPR is a news organization.
One second, madam. How we can confirm it? It is an official message. I think so. I can write in one false message. I can post it in Google so that it may be you can take it and analyze it. Can we know that? I think is there any mechanism to identify the official message so that we can go ahead and conclusion? Is there any algorithm to find out in the knowledge graph? Yeah, I think your lecture is very fantastic, madam. Actually, you are given very abstractive and semantic analysis and everything. I came to know that, but I have this doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the answer here, because you have to choose the sources very carefully ahead of time.
Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. Yeah, yeah.
And that NPR. So you know that you can trust them, and that is why you have chosen them.
Wikipedia is not an official source, madam, but CNN, BBC, we can believe it. But Al Jazeera is also not official source, but it is Al Jazeera belongs to only Taliban and Muslim related organizations. But worldwide it cannot be recognized. Yes, madam.
That is true. I mean, now that there is so much of fake news, right?
Yes, madam.
Even if you trust a news organization, sometimes those news organizations make a mistake, and report news that is not true.
Yes, madam.
And in fact, it is not a easy thing to figure out whether to trust a piece of news or not. So that goes right to the philosophical problem that I talked about, right?
Yes,
so
madam.
What is in your knowledge base, the extraction might be perfect, but whether it is true or not, that is doubtful, right? And there is just no easy way to figure that out.
Yes, madam. If you are taken false message, it may not be good for analysis, because if you are you may be getting good results based on your algorithm or based on your tool, but if output you are showing that it is a false news, why you are analyzed like this? Someone having a question on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, madam.
So some of the ways in which websites trust is determined are things like PageRank, right?
Yeah, PageRank.
Yeah,
and one more thing,
kind
madam.
of thing.
One more thing, my doubt. You are using this is a tool, or you written any algorithm to show analyze all these things by your own, or is it available? The tools are available in already in that semantic web.
For this particular construction, this is actually my student who has worked on it.
Okay.
And over 10 years ago. So I don't think that code is going to be available, but the techniques can be easily redone now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I came to know so many tools are there based on this knowledge graph, and at the same time semantic webs, madam. That's what I know the name of the tool like that. That's why that is my doubt.
So the only NLP tools that we use is Stanford NLP.
Okay.
Stanford NLP is one. There is also something called NLTK.
Yes, madam.
So all of these require tools, which are these NLP tools. That's the main thing that you require. The remaining things are things that you can write on your own. Like it's just software that you write on your own.
Yes, madam. Sorry for disturb you. Thank you, madam. And I am Dr. Dharmaya Devarpal, working as professor in Sri Vishnu Engineering College, madam. I am listening your lecture. Thank you, madam. My doubts are clear. Right. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Actually, I think I should come to the end of my talk now, because it is 4:30. So if you have other questions, you can ask me.
Madam, if required, if it is feasible to you, you can extend a few more minutes and you can have your session, madam.
Okay, so let me just talk about this Technobase as well, right? So as another example of a domain-specific knowledge base, right? So it's the same as before, and the goal was like very vague when we started, just to map out the space of CS concepts and how they're related to each other, right? So there was no particular application or anything that we had in mind. The goal itself was to build a knowledge base for computer science concepts. And I think I explained this line before, so let me just go directly to the techniques that we used. So first of all, these were all the sources that we used. So Wikipedia, of course, but only the pages from this particular category called computing, right? So about 54,000 pages were there from this particular category. So downloaded all those pages, and because they were a source of information for computer science concepts. And similarly, Webopedia and TechTarget are IT-specific websites, and online textbooks similarly. And from each of these sources, we extracted about a total of about 70,000 entities, right? So Wikipedia, basically 54,000 pages lead to 54,000 entities, but here there are 24,000 entities, 16,500 entities, all extracted, as I had mentioned before, this was extracted from the indexes, and Webopedia and TechTarget, they're nicely structured, so we extracted from there. And overall, it was about 70,000 entities that we were able to extract. So entity extraction was straightforward, but what was interesting was to extract the relationships. And I had talked about 4 different ways in which we can extract the relations. One is to look at structured sources and known relations, structured sources and unknown relations, unstructured sources and known relations, and unstructured sources and unknown relations. So let me just show you examples of each of these, right? So the easiest was to look at these structured sources and to make a list of the kinds of relations that could be extracted, right? So some of the interesting relations are relations like type of relations, subtopic of, application of, algorithm for, technique in. So if you're wondering how did we come up with these relations, it's actually not something that we thought about and listed. We actually came up with it by looking at the pages in Wikipedia and trying to determine whether or not what kind of relations we can actually extract. So let's show example here of type of, right? So in Wikipedia, you have many this list of pages here, list of data structures, right? In this case, it is list of data structures, but you have these list of pages for lots of different things. And just looking at the way in which these pages are structured, we thought it's a good source for this type of relationship. So here's an example of the kinds of relations we extracted, right? So simply by parsing this page in a nice way. So there's just a program. So you can look at the source of this Wikipedia page. They give a source, a link for the source, and you just have to parse it. You have to have a wrapper for it, and you can extract this very easily, right? So for example, there is a main heading called binary trees in this page. And under that, there is a list which consists of binary search tree. So the implication is that binary search tree is a type of binary tree, which is what we extracted here. So binary search tree, type of binary tree, right? And then binary tree itself is under this particular heading, which is trees, right? So binary tree, type of tree is another extraction that you can make. And this tree itself is under this particular page, list of something, and that something is data structures. So make the conclusion that tree is a type of data structure. So in order to extract type of relationships, so all we needed to do was look at these list of pages and try to extract these kinds of structures from there, and they are a source of type of relationship for us. And similarly, the subtopic of relationship, right? So here it specifically says list of set theory topics. So just look at pages where it says list of something here topics, then we immediately know that the subtopic of relationship can be extracted from there. So again, as an example, there is Boolean valued model and algebra of sets, and these two occur under this list, right, which is set theory topics. And that is how we can extract Boolean valued model, that is here, and algebra of sets, both are subtopics of set theory, right? Similarly for application of, and here again, this is not a very accurate extraction, but simply looking at the page coding theory and looking at the contents, and in one of the headings is other applications of coding theory. So one of the heuristics we formed was, so suppose we have a page and in the contents of the page, one of the headings is application, contains the word applications, then anything under that heading is going to be an application. So that was like a heuristic that we formed. So here the word application occurs, right? And this occurs in the contents, which is according to our heuristic. And this occurs in the page coding theory. So whatever is here, group testing and analog coding are nothing more than applications of coding theory, and which is what we extracted from there. So similarly for algorithm for, again, there is a page derivative free optimization, and there is even a heading called algorithms, right? So you can see several such pages which talk about computer science topics, and there is a heading called algorithms, and you have a list of all these algorithms under them. Same thing for technique in, again, there is a heading called technique in a document classification, that is the page, heading of the page. So document classification, and you have this list, naive Bayes classifier, latent semantic indexing, all of these are techniques in document classification. So that is how you can extract. And we specifically looked at these pages and we determined that here are all the relations that we can extract. So it's just a matter of writing software or wrappers to do this extraction, and you get it in this way. So next is to look at structured source but unknown relation. So again, this was something that we sort of got to know by looking at the Wikipedia pages, right? So Wikipedia pages sometimes have these kinds of tables at the bottom. And in these tables, you usually have this row heading, like types, concepts, objects, and components, and a bunch of concepts here which correspond to these headings, right? So for different topics, you have different row headings, like objects and components. They're specific to this databases page. For some other page, you might have some other row headings here. So these are like unknown relations, because you can extract something like view is an object in databases, right? And a data dictionary is a component in databases. Concurrency control is a component in databases, and so on, right? So you can use these row headings as relation names, and whatever comes in this list of concepts here, they are the things which are related to the databases or the heading of this page through this particular relation. And of course, not everything is going to be accurate, right? Because it's not like Wikipedia is a perfect structured source. There are going to be lots of things which are imperfect, but you can extract quite a lot of interesting triples in this way. So these relations are unknown to us beforehand, but the source is structured because we know exactly what the structure is. It's going to be a table like this. The only thing we don't know is what kind of relationship is going to be there. So we just extract it and we see. And the next kind of extraction was unstructured source and known relation, right? So again, this was looking at websites. So specifically, in fact, there is only one kind of relation that we extracted, which is synonym of. And that is because in Webopedia and TechTarget, which are the IT specific websites, they give a lot of definitions of things. And typically they have, these kinds of phrases associated with them. Like they have BFS is an abbreviation for breadth first search, breadth first search, right? So that could be a sentence that is there in TechTarget or Webopedia. And or just to have it right in the brackets like this, like BFS brackets breadth first search, right? Or BFS is short for something. So just by looking at these textual patterns, right? It is unstructured source, it is all text, but we only need to identify these patterns and we immediately know that that is going to be a synonym of relationship. So the things that we extracted were things like BFS is a synonym of breadth first search. Regex is a synonym of regular expression and so on, right? Just by looking at these textual patterns. And then finally, the last kind of really complicated and one of the least accurate ways of extracting relations is to look at unstructured source and unknown relations. So here, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this technique called OpenIE. This basically means open information extraction, which simply goes about extracting all verbs in the sentence as a relationship, right? So this is something OpenIE simply means that you don't care about what the relationship actually is. Just look at the sentence, extract the subject, extract the object, and extract the verb that connects these two, right? So I'm simplifying quite a lot here. There is a lot more to it. If you're really interested, there are many papers on OpenIE that you can read. But this is basically what OpenIE does. So you feed it a textual source, and it simply looks at one sentence at a time. And from each sentence, it identifies the subject, the object, and the predicate in between. And it's highly inaccurate, right? So we just decided to run OpenIE on Wikipedia, and we, extracted 400,000 triples, right? But a large proportion of them are simply, junk. And one of the things is that non-technical entities are there in the result, which we don't care about because we only care about the computer science entities, right? And on top of these 400,000 triples, we had to filter them down to get more and more accurate triples, right? So one was to eliminate all the entities which were not in our dictionary. So that just, 100,000 triples were just wiped out from that, and we got about 300,000 triples, right? And even in this 300,000 triples, it's like many of the subjects and objects contained an entity, but they were not exactly the entity, right? So there was like a long phrase containing the entity, which is not a correct identification of the entity itself. So just because the phrase in the subject part or the object part contains the entity doesn't mean that it's a valid extraction. So we decided to eliminate these long phrases containing the entity, and suddenly it jumped down to 100,000 triples. And even in this 100,000 triples, there were these generic entities like the and an or the algorithm, an algorithm. I mean, these are all entities, but they are not really the kind of entities that we care about because we care about specific concepts. So simply by looking at what kind of entities could occur, we could just say things like, if the entity starts with the word the, then remove the triple from our list, right? So just by doing that, we got it down to 3,520 triples. So from 400,000 to triples, just doing these very common sense filtering, we ended up with only 3,520 triples. And the accuracy of this is still only like 65% because there are lots of incorrect extractions there. But there were some useful extractions as well, like gigabit Ethernet is a high-speed form of Ethernet. UTC uses Gregorian calendar and so on. So some useful things, but also quite a lot of things that are useless. And doing this filtering was quite a pain because you have to keep looking at what is right, what is wrong, and what kind of heuristics. So it takes a lot of iterations to come down to something that is, somewhat decent set of triples. Right? Yeah. So this refinement, I did not want to talk about much, so I'll just leave this out for now. And here are a few statistics about Technobase, which you can download actually from the web. About 70,000 unique entities, about 2,000 unique relations, and about 145,000 triples are actually there. And they have the top 5 relationships that we were able to extract are these 5 relations. And this is just a small comparison with 2 other publicly available knowledge bases, just to sort of show that Technobase that we constructed is actually different from these 2 very popular publicly available knowledge bases. So this just shows the number of entities. So we have 70,000 entities, out of which 17,000 are also in DBpedia and 34,000 are in Freebase. And in the relations, none of the relations we extracted are in either of these places. So we had some comparison. So if you're interested, you can read the paper and look at these statistics in more detail. And of course, you can download the data set itself. Okay, so I think I will stop there because it's talking a lot. But I think you get the general flavor of how to go about constructing a knowledge base in a specific domain. And there are lots of techniques, bits and pieces techniques out there that you can use. And in fact, you sort of need to get a feel for what technique works for this particular domain and what technique does not. So it's usually a case of trying lots of different ideas, small ideas, big ideas, and then looking at the quality of what you have extracted and then refining it and so on. So that's basically what I, part of what I wanted to say, but I think it's good to stop now.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for joining in our Atal FDP program and sharing a knowledgeable and informative session on the knowledge graphs and knowledge bases construction and query. Thank you so much for your valuable time and patience. And,
thank you for having me.
We'll be in touch with you and we'll invite you to address our students and faculty in coming days, either in offline mode or online mode. We are so fortunate to have you in our Atal FDP, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is it okay to leave?
Yes, madam. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.